Organizations rely on test automation to help improve software quality, achieve full code coverage, enable intelligence, and reduce cycle time. However, lack of expertise and adoption, inconsistent processes, low-quality software, and minimal application coverage keep organizations from achieving the benefits of end-to-end test automation. An answer to increase adoption and improve execution lies in making the automation solution simple to learn, easy to use, and cross-platform compatible, along with other needed functionality. Hello, and welcome to this audio webcast titled Deliver Rapid, Quality Software with AI-Driven Automated Testing, brought to you by Avo Automation, IDC, and IDG. My name's Tom Schmidt, Digital Content Director at IDG's Strategic Marketing Services, and I'll be the moderator of today's webcast. Joining me is Melinda Ballou, Research Director for Agile ALM Quality and Portfolio Strategies at IDC. Melinda has done extensive competitive analysis and is in the process of completing 4 IDC MarketScapes in the areas of software quality and testing. Along with consumer advocacy, technical and marketing experience, broad industry view, and knowledge of customer needs and requirements, Melinda also focuses on process and organizational strategies, the human aspects that can help or inhibit technology adoption. Hello, Melinda.
Hi, Tom. Great to be part of this.
Also joining me is Annalisa Camarillo, CMO of Avo. Annalisa is a hands-on Silicon Valley marketing executive with over 20 years of experience leading in brand, content, and product marketing, high-growth software companies, and startups. Hello, Annalisa.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Also joining me is Donne Reben, Vice President and Head of Quality and Governance at CNA Financial, customer of Avo Automation. Welcome, Donne.
Hi, Tom. Yeah, thank you for having me.
And finally, please welcome Chris Horn, Head of Product Marketing and Customer Success at Avo. Chris brings over 25 years of product management and marketing experience, aligning customer and market demands, drive sustained growth, enterprise value for software organizations. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Tom. It's great to be here.
Melinda, as you can see here on this slide, we're going to be taking a pretty deep dive into the need for automation and continuous testing today. Can you kick things off for us by sharing what IDC is seeing in the market?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Thank you, Tom. So looking at this first title slide here, Driving Digital Innovation with Continuous Testing, we're finding that digital innovation is necessarily driven by software, right? And organizations increasingly, especially over the past year, as we've experienced explicitly with the pandemic and moving forward with that, the opportunity for leveraging digital transformation has been a survival approach for the organizations that we deal with. And if we look at the third platform technologies that enable that, when we're looking at the cloud, for instance, big data, analytics with machine learning and artificial intelligence, with the collaborative types of tools that we've been using to communicate with each other and execute, and looking at mobile and other kinds of diverse deployment vehicles that organizations have been leveraging, we're finding that the third platform has enabled a shift towards digital transformation and is informing innovation accelerators across the board for organizations and across verticals as well. Quality plays a pivotal role in this, which we'll be discussing throughout this part of the conversation. When we look at the top trends that are driving DevOps and quality adoption, we're seeing that software-defined cloud as a critical aspect for organizations to be able to coordinate with each other, the abstraction layer that isolates workloads from infrastructure, and automation and analytics that drive ease of access, content, updates to information, both for the collaborative tools that we leverage as well as for automation, and the organizations that have been able to leverage that to execute effectively over these past years. Increasing use of automation for common access to information has been critical as well, in combination with changing processes. So it's important to remember that technology alone is insufficient. The process organizational changes to be able to adopt tools and technologies at the appropriate times in iterative kinds of ways to be responsive to changing business dynamics and technology is really critical as well. From a DevOps perspective, automation for testing and then also orchestration has been critical to allow organizations to be able to execute effectively. On DevOps itself, where we've seen the shift to coordination between development teams and operations, and the ways in which organizations are able to execute to deliver software more effectively, quickly, with faster, less churn and faster delivery times, as well as the opportunity for improving on quality in that context has been critical. And now the emergence as well for analytics, so machine learning and AI, performance and user experience, quality across platforms, and the opportunity to take data that was before invisibly locked up often in automation tools and making that pragmatically actionable for organizations, seeing the connections with predictive analytics emerging now increasingly, and the opportunity to take that information, make it visible, and then do useful process change as a result of the information that one gets in that context. So when we look at continuous testing itself, the drivers and benefits for testing, high quality, rapidly developed software is what's been enabling digital transformation, leveraging DevOps capabilities and intertwining the two. The lack of continuous testing is a core bottleneck. No one wants to be producing software more quickly and releasing it more rapidly if it's poor performing, if it's ugly, and if it's broken. And so the ability to test continuously is a key aspect of this. And we also have found in organizations across the board find that finding deployment defects costs at least as much as 200 times to remediate. Reputational costs can be incalculable. So very critical to have that iterative approach to continuous testing rather than dealing with these defects later in the process. We also, in our survey information, have found that organizations are placing product and service quality as a top priority for their moving forward into the next period of time. Adaptive testing strategies and application responsiveness and use of data that is actionable, process improvement enable change and innovation, and these are benefits that come with the shift towards more continuous approaches to execution for automated testing. Cutting costs by shifting left, so testing earlier in the life cycle to avoid that danger that's not yet come, and also design up front from the get-go, architecting for more resilient, better performing applications is another factor in improving what organizations are able to do, and then coordinating that throughout the life cycle to keep testing iteratively in ways that enable better quality with each iterative approach to the software that you deploy. And then creating efficiencies of scale by incorporating testing as part of what the development teams do. So we're finding that these smaller teams, if you're doing sprints, or larger teams, embedding testing expertise and individuals with that knowledge as part of those teams helps to create better adoption and imbue the testing and development environments with a kind of coordinated execution that's critical. We're finding this combination of centralized practices, which were the norm before, and distributed deployment out to teams where organizations do some of or both, enable companies to be able to move forward and the process and organizational change that's needed to adopt continuous testing. And then finally, successful adoption strategies for continuous testing. There's a key focus on cultural, organizational, and process change that has to be a part of what organizations invest in. So that requires top-down support and evangelism from the executive side on the one hand, recognizing, raising that up, and investing in the process change. And then on the grassroots level, finding members of the organization who are able to engage avidly and increase mentoring across those parts of the organization, bringing in services sometimes, but also mentoring one another with best practice execution on the part of the teams from the grassroots side also helps to make that shift and then enable business agility with software that is better quality and more responsive dynamically to changing conditions. Now, this is a slide about the COVID-19 pandemic, and to me it really speaks to the complete change in perspective that many organizations that we deal with experienced, and ourselves personally, right? Digital transformation is years away. I don't see our company having to change anytime soon, and there comes COVID-19, right? I don't want to in any way minimize the human tragedy and the costs to many who may be listening to this call of the pandemic. And also the pandemic demanded of us a kind of almost miraculous shift in what we were able to achieve with a level of rapidity that was unimaginable before this happened. And so there is a way in which this slide epitomizes for me the opportunity that comes with an opening like this. And we see this borne out when we look at some of the survey results that IDC has for the ways in which organizations leverage DevOps and that transition to enable this dynamic change to digitization that the pandemic demanded of us. So we have many examples, and this isn't really the place for that, of organizations who needed to go and put 240,000 employees remote in a week, right? Others who needed to get 400,000 users to access their information virtually in 3 weeks. So there's just all kinds of stories like that. But when we look at the ways in which DevOps helped the most and the kinds of areas that folks focused on, one was on customer-facing applications, so about 32%. Another was in employee-facing applications. Now, survey was done in September. Those are around 20%. If it had been done earlier, more in the May timeframe, I expect those numbers would have been reversed. And then partner channel-facing apps, as well as API enablement of legacy applications. So when we think about legacy as the backbone for many organizations and the back end of what folks need to deal with, that became a critical piece of this. And what we found, the teams that were able to engage in accelerated application delivery via DevOps were in a much better position to use software innovation and agility to enable their organizations to respond to the crisis. So, and those that weren't rapidly became more engaged in these kinds of approaches. This is from a CIO sentiment survey that IDC did also in the September timeframe, or actually June, and then came out with it in September. But managing risk was paramount to protect the future. That became just so evident and really clear to us all. Risk is a piece of what we need to be thinking about from quality testing perspective also, right? So mitigating risks of all kinds became a focus. Obviously, cyber threats, a very significant risk factor. Advanced security solutions, pulling those together. From an executive guidance perspective, rethinking risk management. And to my eye, that also must include value. So when we consider where the greatest risk is, it's important to associate that with those applications that are most critical to your organization to move it forward, right? And leveraging proven frameworks like the NIST cybersecurity framework, for instance, making sure that the appropriate automation, training, and guidelines are in place, and creating capabilities to make better risk assessments and create models that will enable analysis for even incredibly unpredictable circumstances such as the ones we faced in the past year, and then making that investment in data excellence so that there are real-time, holistic, and secure data access to people and systems. Then in terms of planning for uncertainty and focusing on adaptability and agility, this also is a key aspect of what we saw organizations needing to focus on. So scenario planning, leveraging models, and prioritizing by strategic relevance. We'll talk more about Agile throughout this presentation. The folks from Avo and also CNA will be discussing ways in which it impacted their offerings on the AVO side and CNA's execution. But Agile plays a critical role as part of the continuous testing, enablement, and DevOps that we're discussing. And the prioritization piece is also incredibly relevant. So how do we determine the strategic importance of one initiative versus another? Appropriate prioritization and contextualization there is critical. And then delivery of rapid iterations to support explicit business outcomes. Here we saw a shift as well in C-suite priorities. So you can see that resilient business operations, which on the right before pandemic were like number 7, became number 1. And then customer experience programs, which were like a number 8, became number 2. So this shift also was driven in part by what organizations experienced to enable those critical pieces for their organizations, the customer-facing aspect of this, the resilience. Both of those aspects were critical. And as we think about transforming to enable business resilience, a key aspect of that is the quality of the software on which businesses are built. So IT resilience means software application resilience. Resilience is part of the DevOps pipeline, and rethinking how organizations manage what they're doing in that context, both from an infrastructure and from a software development perspective and a quality perspective to imbue what organizations are doing with regards to their quality execution. When we look at the role of software development in supporting digital products and services, we've seen this transformation as well in organizations becoming the service provider for digital value creation that's been a shift as well over the past year, and quality software is critical for that piece. And when we consider the process bottlenecks that organizations struggle with, the first is business integration, so enabling that coordination with those key business stakeholders who have the knowledge and understanding to prioritize and drive where the organization is heading. Then manual processes, lack of automation, where folks are continuing to do things in tedious and arduous ways that are also error-prone, and then followed by testing and QA. So pulling that quality piece together with those first two aspects of business integration and manual processes means automation, right? Pulling automation and effective processes together to execute more effectively. When organizations are scaling DevOps, enhancing customer experience is a key aspect to a driver to the scaling of DevOps. Faster and higher quality deployments, again, critical because software is that enabler, and high quality software is vital. And responding to the pandemic at that point, that was in the September timeframe. When we think about automated software quality and its growth, we're looking at a CAGR of about 7.1% over the next 5 years, which for a fairly mature market is significant. The higher growth areas are in continuous testing and in agile integration and coordination with DevOps strategies. Automation, as I mentioned before, having a common source of information to collaborate with one another, have current information about the status of applications on a variety of levels with regards to quality is an area of focus for organizations as they move forward to execute. We also saw the continued adoption of DevOps and the growth for DevOps adoption year over year. And it's interesting when you look at the slide, you see, there's an increase in people who are not planning to do DevOps. What does that mean? Well, what that means is that more people are doing DevOps, so they don't need to plan to do it anymore, right? And this is research that we've been doing over the past 3 years as a worldwide survey of about 5,000 developers. And this particular question, there were about 1,000. And this is looking at the ways in which the increases in speed for organizations, the velocity of deployment increased to multiple times a day, doubled, weekly, every 2 to 3 weeks, and monthly. So it just gives a sense for those of you in the audience that need some data points around, well, why do I care about doing DevOps? Why does it matter to incorporate continuous quality and testing as part of this? As you're more quickly deploying applications, those need to be applications that are of high quality, performance, and resilience, as well as relevance. As organizations are shifting to agile quality and continuous testing, I've had a number of questions about strategies to enable that approach. And these are 3 sample processes and practices that we see people adopting to execute better for agile testing and incorporating it as well. So the ability to incorporate testers into these sprint teams and have that be part of what organizations do. The coordination with the business team so that what you produce is not irrelevant, that it's vital and engaged with the most current thinking for the business people. And then the opportunity to automate and leverage that as part of visibility into what's actually going on with the software. There's a fear of failure that many organizations have imbued into their organizations. And so what we've encouraged people to do is to destigmatize failure in a variety of ways by holding up a fail-fast culture and being able to respond quickly to address something quickly and then move on so that you aren't continuing to execute on things that are going to be problematic for you. And here's an example of the fast release times enabled by agile approaches. We also see here in this survey a focus on different aspects of DevOps and how those have grown over the past year from 2019 to 2020 and 2021. We don't have that data quite yet, but you can see that automated testing increased there, automated code quality analytics, another area, and security analysis. We see these as being interwoven with one another, quality and security and execution around this. So we see this increase of 5 to 10% in that time frame from 2020 to 2021. With this most current research that's coming out now, I expect that to increase very significantly. I'll be interested to see that research when it comes out. What do we see driving growth? Big data analytics, that machine learning and AI that I talked about before, making data actionable and also enabling organizations visibility into what's going on in ways that weren't possible otherwise. A shift to myriad devices, not just mobile, but a digitization overall. The cloud and API economy with a shift towards microservices development, and also a low-code, no-code approach that's enabling organizations to bring in citizen developers and democratizing that, and then open source as well. So a call to action from our side around this is cut costs in your organization by shifting left with your testing to identify and address problems sooner. And those problems could be related to irrelevance to the business, or user interfaces, or performance, security issues. Create efficiencies of scale by incorporating testing as part of development teams so that this becomes something that is baked into what your teams are doing as they're deploying and as developing and deploying software. And also successful adoption strategies for continuous testing. We see that being a primary focus for organizations. And then the impact of cultural and organizational change, the role that that plays, is a critical piece to focus on. Quality engineering and continuous agile testing are vital to digital innovation and DevOps. And this is even more essential now as we move into what comes next, as we emerge from this pandemic and have that visceral sense of, wow, I don't know what might come next. I need to be able to be adaptive and responsive to the unknown. Automation and organizational transformation from adaptive testing providers can bring help from a needed transition to continuous testing. And we see an expansion of this area moving into the next 4 or 5 years, leveraging innovation and differentiated solution providers. So that's it for me. There's a little picture of my family. And I'm going to bring it back to Tom now. Tom?
Excellent. Thanks, Melinda. Very, very insightful. Now I'd like to ask Annalisa to join us. And Annalisa, can you tell our audience a little bit about Avo Automation and what you do?
Happy to do that, Tom. Thank you so much. And I hope everyone is staying safe and is at peace during these challenging times, because I know that it's been a tough 2 years. COVID has prompted the move to a more digitally embedded society, and I think you might have noticed a lot of that, the trends in that direction from the data that Melinda just shared. This has all made the need for quality software even bigger today. And to give this additional context, but you also saw some of these important data points in Melinda's research. The latest test automation survey found that up to 50% of software engineers say they deal with at least one customer impact issue every month due to quality. And so a big question that we get is, so how should you tackle this type of challenge, especially given that it's directly impacting customers? We believe the answer is to automate software testing as a starting point. There's so much that can be automated, but the focus today is really automating software testing so that you can maintain quality, accelerate software delivery, and allow QA teams to spend more time sharing their ideas for software improvements. There's so much opportunity there. So who is Avo? From day one, we leveraged the IT and testing community to build our automation solutions, and you'll see this reflected in how our customers rate us on peer review sites like G2, Gartner Peer Insights, and many others. That said, we placed in the G2 top performer quadrant for test automation, and we're continuing to hone our solutions with customer feedback. Customer feedback is king. Avo has been working with some of the largest enterprise companies in the Fortune 500. This includes companies like CNA that you're going to hear from today, which we're all excited about, Voya Financial and Bank of Oklahoma, and there are many others across many industries. Everything we designed into our solution was compelled by a customer need, and we continue to add more capabilities to enable customer innovation. Just a couple of other things that I wanted to point out. To make the automation experience is seamless, we're the only company that has integrated process discovery with RPA and test automation. So no matter which product you're using, they will always work seamlessly, and because they were built to work together. In addition to that, we're one of the first to be certified for both SAP and Oracle applications, among many others, because we're able to support over 200 technologies. Now let me turn to our customers and what we've learned from them. This is a typical journey we see for quality assurance teams. Not much is automated. And if there is automation, it's often disjointed across a diverse set of testing tools, processes, and technologies. And so a question that arises is, how do we create a much more cohesive experience across testing that's going to help us deliver quality software fast? As challenges amass, quality and speed decline. I think that's kind of stating the obvious. When customers reach this point of low return, that's when we come in to say it's time to reevaluate. You want return on investment, and it comes in many forms. It's not just time savings. It's also improving quality. It's also ensuring that customers are getting exactly what they need out of doing business with you. We've proven that a modern Agile delivery process requires intelligence, simplicity, and speed. And those are the three elements that we have built in that are inherent to Avo products. And you're going to see some of that in a demonstration that's coming up. So to just kind of give these a little bit of definition, intelligence really speaks to the inherent AI skills that have been built into our products. Simplicity means it's code-free. No scripts, no need to do a lot of customization. It is code-free. And speed is 5x delivery, because you're able to catch defects sooner. You're able to work much faster because the platform is simple to use. So how do we help our customers? There is some rocket science to our approach in that we've integrated these core automation capabilities and they work seamlessly together, whether it be process discovery, test automation, and RPA. They've all been built on a common design framework, and for that reason, it makes it easier for our customers to work across any one of these capabilities. But today we're going to focus on test automation, and we're going to talk to you about why test automation is so simple. Our test automation is so simple to use, code-free, AI-driven, and because of the fact that you can work between any one of our solutions, whether it be process discovery, RPA, or test automation, you can actually auto-create test cases for speed and delivery to market. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dane Reben, VP and Head of Quality and Governance, to share the transformation journey at CNA Insurance. Dane, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. So I've been working with SLK for more than 3 years now, and Avo automation for just over 12 months. So let me start with telling you a little bit about CNA and the vision for technology. The CNA is a commercial insurance carrier, which means we sell insurance to businesses versus individual people. We were founded in 1897 and currently insure over 1 million businesses and professionals from 67 offices around the world. Our new agenda for technology includes transitioning from a project-centric delivery organization to a product-centric one. As we have made the move towards a more true Agile delivery model, there was a need for rapid testing, aligned for less defects and faster time to market. CNA wanted to maximize automation across the enterprise and support heterogeneous test automation across multiple platforms, that being web, mobile, mainframe, desktop. As with many companies of our size and history, you name it. And of course, the bottom line is we had to reduce our costs and the number of automation tools. Let me step back for a minute and explain our challenges that precipitated the need for change and automation. Our test automation approach was code-based. It was unstructured and not optimized. Testing was very much regression-focused instead of business transaction-focused. It resulted in increased time to develop test cases and elongated test cycles. This historical environment resulted in lower quality due to application pressure to release, the lack of test coverage depth, and it also increased our costs. And as Melinda had said earlier, at the end of the day, we do want to keep our costs down. The situation created difficulty in developing in-depth test scenarios and suitable coverage due to multiple technologies in the environment, as I mentioned earlier. At the time, there was no solution that effectively allowed us to stitch together our existing automation in support of our broader end-to-end testing needs. As a result of all of this, we partnered with Avo to help provide solutions. The solution was to start with process discovery. That allowed us to document our processes so that when we started doing the automation, we had the documentation already built out. We started with our top 24 business-critical applications to accelerate delivery, amplify quality, and save time. So far, we have had a great experience with Avo. It has been really collaborative and smooth. We have been able to enable rapid automation because Avo, Discover, and Assure work together. This has allowed us to expand our automated functional testing at twice the rate compared to what we were able to do previously. We have also expanded our Devops and filled in multiple gaps in our test coverage. At the end of the day, we are already seeing a steady reduction in cost, which is allowing us to deliver the best return on investment. So what's next for CNA? We continue to promote a community of testing that spans common standards, best practices, tooling, and of course, cross-team collaboration. Focus remains on expanding our test automation and non-functional test practices. Avo has been key for our success in these areas, and we are thankful for our progress and our partnership with Avo.
Excellent. Thanks, Donna. It's always great to sort of see a solution through a customer's eyes. Chris Horn, you have a demo for us of Agile test automation in action. Can you tell us a little about that first?
I do, Tom. Sorry about that. Yes, I do, but what I'd like to do is have a bit of a setup, which is always important, so we kind of get our compass heading right. And so let me go ahead and take us through a few slides for that setup, and then, yes, we'll jump over to the demo. And then I'll finish up with a few other slides on the end, and we'll get to your questions and answers. We're looking forward to that just the same. So with that, and we heard Melinda and Donna speak of this, and Lisa even touched on it as well, when one thinks of Agile development. And you think about the teaming, because it's all about teaming. Team is very focused on appropriately building something, right, that application to fit and provide those customers, that customer base, with the appropriate need and value. Whether this is internal or it's external from a product vendor perspective, there's always that need. And one of the main foci within that team is the development process. Testing sometimes gets left behind, not intentionally. Quality is important. And what we have discovered and what we found with many of the prospects and customers we've spoken with, and spoken with others, other market leaders as well, that the development process and the development effort continue on from really day one after sprint planning occurs. But testing often undergoes a bit of a delay, sometimes too much of a delay. And the chart that you can see before you here represents that. It's a classic bell curve showing what typically occurs during a development cycle. We have change to product, whether it be new or delta change to an existing application. And yes, defects happen. They do happen. And it's fine prior to release. Right? Quality is measured at release time. Okay? And it should be measured along the way. That's the key. But getting that measurement as soon as possible, getting an idea of where you're at, is critical, and it connects back to your testing plan and your ability to execute. And the key here, and this is often what's missed, is it's not how quickly so much you can start development, it's how quickly you can start testing in parallel. And so what you typically see, what we have typically seen, is testing teams end up starting late, so there's a test gap. That ends up, given the pressure that is the schedule, right, the development schedule, that ends up putting pressure on how much testing can be done, and you end up having a smaller coverage window, and the result is determining what level of quality is acceptable for that given release period. So you end up with that release readiness gap at the end. Now, sometimes that gets worked out. Sometimes you move into the next sprint, right? But how quickly can you get this underway and get those QA teams working in parallel with the development team? That's really the question. That's what's important. So with Avo Assure and our test automation platform, we enable our customers, our testers, the QA testers and those teams within those Agile development teams, to be able to work in parallel with those development efforts, with those very developers who are bringing those important changes to that application. And so using our intelligent object capture capabilities, among others, and I'll show you a few in the demo, as Tom mentioned, we enable Agile teams to reduce the time it takes for a QA tester to work in parallel with that team or within that team, gives them more time as a result to perform, right, design and perform more tests, which then has an expansive effect, an extended effect on the degree or amount of testing and the coverage that's provided. So that on the back side of the bell curve, again, that time pressure is always there. Are we ready? Time to release. Can we go now? Is the quality there? These teams and those QA testers are now ready to answer that question, yes, and I can show you how, where, and why. So those release windows and timelines can be met effectively. From a demo standpoint, let me give you a quick setup of what I'm going to show you. Okay, it's exciting. I wish I could show you more, but I've been squeezed on time here. Well, what I am going to show you, and the circumstance I'm going to set up here, is let's take ourselves into a situation where we have an existing application that's been released, right? It's at a version, you pick the version number, a version 3, 3.1. It exists. And of course, there is a test plan that goes along with that existing version, right? Either for regression purposes or whatnot, all right? But now, it has occurred, looking at the roadmap, that there's a new sprint that's being planned. And yes, it's going to have a release window to it. Same similar bell curve-like atmosphere that I just expressed in the previous slides. And so now, with sprint planning underway, the test team that we're looking to enable quickly and in an accelerated manner to work in parallel with that or those developers, that QA test team is asking themselves, what change is being brought about here? What is or are the delta points? So I can now get into Avo Assure and start working in parallel right away to prepare for the upcoming changes that are in the application. And so I'm going to show you the before, and I'm going to show you the after, and I'm going to fill in the gaps here with the demo and how quickly and easily we enable a tester or test team to actually do just that. So with that, let's switch over to the demo.
Okay, so we've switched over to our demo screen here. And as I had set up in the presentation, we really have two situations here. One that represents the existing application to which there is or are tests being run against, continually run against that existing released application. And like with many development environments and applications that are under development, it's ongoing, right? It's iterative. And so you'll have releases of different sizes, different dimensions, makeups that occur. And in the example I'm going to give you, there's an extension to a web application that we have in here. It's a fictitious website called Avo Bank. Okay. And so I'm going to show you the base application, which is a funds transfer application. Again, it's fictitious. And then we're going to add a apply for loan screen and fields that go along with that. And so that's going to be part of our new development. But the challenge here, which gets back to what I showed in the presentation, is developers start their planning. QA testers are part of the process. But how can we quickly enable a QA tester or test teams to participate in development efforts from day one, right? Start performing their tests, start creating their tests, and ultimately performing those in parallel with the development efforts, outside of the fact that there might be UI involved and needing to wait for that. So let's go ahead and jump in, and I'll show you how you would do that in Avo Assure. So before we get going, let me give you a little bit of the lay of the land here. Okay, what you see before you is something we call mind maps. Okay, and a mind map is essentially a depiction, right, as well as the objects within, right, that tie it together, of your test plan. And you can establish a test plan and the underlying objects really any way that you see fit or need to relative to your application, how it's designed, and how you'd like to test it. So as you can see at the topmost object here that's in a dark blue shade, the legends at the bottom left for those that are interested in the different colors and what they mean. And so the top object is our module. And a module represents a container of all that is in it that will be under test, right? Depending upon how you've devised your modules. Modules become very important when you're creating end-to-end tests because you're selecting those modules collectively in a specific order to be tested. Hence, you could have an end-to-end test that flows from your web application that might be, say, Salesforce, okay, or your own homegrown web application, all the way through to interacting with your mainframe application, SAP, and so on and so forth. And so even though you're interested in testing at a module level, you're always interested in saying, from a business process standpoint, how does that test work and does it work as expected, right, as designed? So you're going to want to be able to test that as well. And modules enable you to be able to do that. And within a module, you will have various scenarios, and you can have n number of scenarios just the same. And within a scenario, you're going to have screens. Okay. Now, I realize for some of you are thinking, what about API testing? That's separate for us. We certainly do provide API testing, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But where there are screens involved, which is always the case with user interface development and, of course, testing, you'll have screens involved here as well. And then you'll have a number of what could be one or more test cases that hang off of a screen. And the reason why that's the case is because you're going to have objects, fields, elements of different types and natures that are going to be part of your test case and the steps that are executed as part of each of those tests against a screen within a scenario, okay? And lastly, where you see, and you see this on some of the screens, you'll see a recycling symbol. That has to do with our ability to be able to repurpose and reuse existing screens and the objects within, okay? So even though you have a confirmation screen, if the confirmation is the same from another screen, you can actually reuse that. And yes, we will associate it appropriately to that part in the application from a step execution standpoint. Okay, very powerful, very, very flexible, and also really easy to maintain your tests within this graphical environment. Okay, so in this case, as I said, we've got an Avo Bank application, fictitious as it is, it's funds transfer. And this is what we've got released right now. And now we're moving towards this new development effort. So let's go ahead and jump over to that. And so in planning for this new development and the sprint planning process, right, the development team, along with the QA team, the entire sprint team is working on the new release and they're planning for that. And so the QA counterparts, the team members, are learning about what's going to be built and they want to jump in as soon as possible. Okay, so how might they do that even though there isn't anything defined yet, right? In terms of the application having been created, there's no user interface. They don't necessarily know what the fields are going to look like. They'll know the names of the fields, so they have various attributes and information that way to work with. But in most other test environments, they might be frozen. They might not be able to take that next step and work in parallel with the development team. Again, to expand coverage, but also collapse the schedule of and around testing that's needed. Okay, so again, getting back to that bell curve that I had represented or mentioned, and being able to move quickly and with agile or agility within that test that test portion of the development process. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in here. Right. So what we would do quite simply is go back to our relevant test plan, right? And we're going to go back to our funds transfer application and we're going to add the apply loan scenario and then the screen and then also a test case. Okay. And as you're also seeing here, which is another powerful feature of Avo Assure, is you can make assignments to what would be members of the team and also the project assignments or elements for project management purposes. So we have two different types of tasks in Avo Assure. We have a design task, test design task, and we have a test execution task. So the reason for this is that often test teams are broken out into different groups, those that do design, given a skill set, maybe a knowledge around or specific pertaining to a specific application. And then there are those that actually focus on executing the operational side of test execution. Within Avo Assure, you can manage your test automation and your testing that way, right? In this case, as you can see, the very person who's done the design is also going to be assigned to execution as well. You can also assign a start and end date, and also powerful, just like with development teams where you have code reviews, right, where another developer will review the actual authoring developer's code just to get a second pair of eyes on it, make sure it's secure, make sure there's nothing nefarious going on there. Same thing is true as we provide within Avo Assure. You can have an assignment for designing a test and also have a reviewer take a look at what that designer, that author of that test is doing to make sure there's that second pair of eyes and it holds to the governance principles, policies, perhaps, of your business and the quality level to which you hope and plan to attain. So with that, let's go ahead and continue on with our demo. So what we're going to do now, we don't have the application yet, but we're going to go ahead and continue on. And within our screen object, we're going to create the objects that we've learned are going to exist on this application, right? Within this UI. We're going to go ahead and create those objects before the application is ready. Okay, now typically with many test automation platforms and environments, they require the application to scrape or capture the object. In this case, we're going to be pre-creating those objects. All right, so here we are in our test design module, and here is where you're going to, on a step-by-step basis, this is exactly the way your test was executed. And again, we're a web application, so we're going to bring up the browser, and we're executing it or initiating it that way, specify a URL, and then we're merely taking those objects that we created and assigning them to the pre-built keywords, right, to establish the functions, the actions that should be taken within our test, okay? And so with that, we've now created a baseline test for this to-be web application. So the development team has just pre-released the application to the QA team to finalize their tests. And what the QA team is going to do is review the application just to verify that the fields that were discussed during sprint planning exist. The various types of fields, right, button controls and so on and so forth are as expected. And then they're going to finalize their tests. And again, this is where the beauty comes in of this ability to pre-create your objects, right, your temporary objects, and then map them over. But before we do that, let's take a look at the application, and then we'll get into the mapping process. So this is a simple application. It has 3 fields, as you can see on screen. We're going to navigate through it, and then there's also continue button. Now the QA test team is actually going to map the actual screen objects to the temporary objects that were originally created. It's very simple. Stay focused because it happens very, very quickly. It's that easy. So to start with, we have our pre-created objects. And you can see that they're pre-created, and I'll call them temporary objects because they're shaded in purple. And when we finish capturing the objects on screen, using the new UI, at least the one that was released internally, those fields, those captured objects will show up unshaded, right? We will then map the various objects between each other. So let's go ahead and take a look at the capture process to establish our real captured objects and then the mapping process thereafter. So we're going to start our intelligent capture process. We're going to initiate our engine. We're now going to just point and click at the various objects that we need to capture for our test. Okay. And as you can see, the shaded ones represent the temporary objects and the unshaded ones represent the new ones. We're now going to map the recently scraped or captured objects from our UI and map them over to our temporary objects, hence replacing those objects, but not replacing the identifiers within the test case. So the test cases that we pre-designed stay intact. It's a very powerful feature. Allows QA testers, the test team, to get in front of and work alongside the development team and still be able to rapidly complete their tests once the application, the user interface, has been completed. And so with that, that completes my demo.
All right. I hope you've all enjoyed that demo. I always enjoy giving that demo. It's fun. It's pretty short and sweet and to the point. Things can move a little quickly, right? But that ability to pre-create those test objects and then map them easily once the UI is available is a really cool feature. We're always excited to show that. I wanted to take us back to a platform slide that we have because in the demo, I spoke and primarily showed, right? I talked about the web application, right? The web application. But at Avo Assure, our platform supports much more than that, not just from an application technology and test automation perspective at large, but also several other integrated, interconnected capabilities that obviously I was not, due to time purposes, able to show you during the demo. So I wanted to quickly cover those, right? Rest assured that what you witnessed in the demo, experience-wise, is exactly the same experience you will have when using other application types and associated technologies. So if you are saying to yourself, well, that's great for a web application, but what about my desktop apps? What about my mobile app? I'm part of an SAP ecosystem, right? I have Salesforce. The experience that you saw is the same experience. The process for capturing objects and designing them is exactly the same. And you're going to use a no-code approach, our no-code approach in our test automation platform throughout the entire process. While I didn't show API testing, right, that would have been a little into the weeds given the demonstration I gave you, we do support API testing using our no-code test environment. We have keywords, which, as I was describing in the demo, are pre-built functions that you can pull from a list. We have pre-built keywords that represent API tests or testing as well. I talked about the ability to do on-demand debugging, right? That's there. It's the same whether it's a web application or these other technology types. So that when you're finished in the design process, you're 99.9% sure that test is going to successfully complete. What I didn't talk about or mention was our ability to scale tests, right? We were doing these individually, or you might think about doing this individually. You can actually hang together the various modules that I showed you at the front end of the demo within our mind maps and string together or associate the various modules of testing into what would be end-to-end tests as needed, right? From a business user quality test perspective, right? And when looking to execute that and distribute that kind of testing, we support the ability to smartly schedule that test execution in such a way where using resource pools, execution resource pools, will choose the appropriate test window that meets your needs based on how you schedule it. So this means that if you're in an Agile development and that team finishes one day, has a daily build, and then wants to run said tests so that you get the results for the next day, you can do that with Avo Assure using the exact means that I just spoke of. Very powerful capability. We also play very well and very friendly with other platforms just the same. We're not trying to be everything to everybody. We understand our role and our place and our core technology skill set. And that is around QA testing and being a test automation platform that fits into an Agile environment where you have CI/CD underway with, say, Jira, Jenkins, Bamboo, and others, as well as application lifecycle management platforms. And we can play well and do play well with those through pre-built integrations that we have. If you're concerned about version control, we support GitHub. Okay, so with that, I would like to extend to each and every one of you a 14-day assisted trial for a test scenario, or maybe scenarios, twist our arm a bit, of your choice. So please contact us at info@avoautomation.com, or just go to our website and request a demo. We would love to chat with you, and let's get the conversation started. Tom, back over to you for what I believe is going to be some very exciting Q&A.
Thanks, Chris. Terrific demo. We have a little time left for questions, so let's go to them. Okay, first couple questions I think I'll pass to you, Melinda. What are the biggest challenges to organizations for making a shift to continuous testing?
I'd say the biggest challenge is actually the cultural and process and organizational challenge of shifting what people have done before, assuming that they have been testing in consistent ways before, which many organizations, most actually have not, and moving towards a more continuous approach, an agile approach to testing. It helps, of course, if the organization is already engaging in agile development work and or agile business process execution and have moved more towards the type of product-oriented organization the way that Done had described CNA doing. That said, investing in support to mentor organizations to move from existing more pedantic waterfall approaches to agile testing is an important aspect to succeed in making that transition. Also coupling with the appropriate automated testing service provider, evaluating the tools that are out there that map best to your process needs and as well as to your functional needs to execute well would be an important aspect of making that transition, and then tying it back into whatever DevOps pipeline approaches you have so that there's coordination between those and what you're doing for testing, as well as value stream management to prioritize your overarching initiatives, whether you're using some type of agile tool to do that work or using something like collaborative work management or even PPM. But that's a start. You've got to begin there from a process organizational perspective to make that change and set the stage for success.
Another question for you, Melinda. What role do agile approaches play for continuous testing? And how does our company begin if we're not yet engaging in agile or consistent agile approaches?
When we think about continuous, the continuous part of continuous testing is basically agile, right? And so making that transition is not, in some ways, as radically different as some people might think. And although I just talked about the ways in which it's important to make those changes, Agile makes sense because it's a feedback loop. It means that organizations are coordinating between those who are going to be impacted most by what the changes are that are being implemented, and then also those who are executing on that, the developers and those who are testing as well. And so from my perspective, you can begin by starting with a small team focused on an initiative that has enough engagement from the business that there'll be visibility once you've made that transition or succeeded, and not so overwhelming that you can't accomplish it in a short period of time. It can also be quite helpful to bring in mentoring from those various service firms who are focused on agile transitions and agile transformation, and or if you're working with a continuous testing provider and they have strong agile process change support, working with them as well can be quite helpful. So you don't have to be systemic in your agile approaches to begin. The first step in any journey is the beginning of moving towards the end goal of something that's much further along, right? I think it's the adage is, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And so you can begin and make that initial effort to transition. It's quite helpful if your executives are well bought into it and lift up what you're doing as a part of what they need to be focusing on for business agility and adaptability as well.
Very good. Donna, a question for you. What improvements are you seeing in your defect rate?
We've actually seen great improvements in our defect rate. They've reduced across the board, so in pre-production and production. We've also seen a decrease in stories rejected by our product owners because the code in pre-production, because of all this automation, it is so good that the acceptance criteria are actually being met. This is really due to our automation-led approach enabling for a greater level of testing. So great improvements.
Another question for you, Donna. How has test automation optimized your customer experience?
So, yeah, it definitely has. So it enables a faster time to market, and for a product-centric model, this results in definitely a better customer experience. So all in all, our business and our customers are very happy with the results.
Chris, a question for you. How does your software make it easier for me to adopt testing tools?
Thanks, Tom. Well, Avo Assure, it does it in several ways. Avo Assure provides a consistent, easy-to-use, no-code test automation platform that enables QA managers to assign testing activities. And I talked about this in the demo. They can also manage the test development and execution, right? Now, I want to be careful about the development. It's no code, but manage the creation of those tests, just the same from a management perspective. And then it also enables QA testers to design test cases using our intelligent image capture capabilities across the different technologies. And again, I've said this before, do so in a no-code manner. So you get the acceleration through how we capture or can capture, as well as the no-code, which gives you two benefits: quick and higher acceleration for creation relative to start your testing, but also the ability to more easily manage both the objects and the test cases thereafter.
Another question for you, Chris. One of the issues about adopting testing tools at our organization, fear of exposing failure. How do we address those kinds of barriers?
Well, great question. And it's I want to point us back to Melinda's answer, because that was a terrific answer, but I'll add to it as well this way, and that is what we do when we encounter that kind of challenge with either a prospect or even a customer is we help that organization to focus more on the quality and value, right? You heard about me speak to this during the presentation relative to what's being developed or the outcome that they're looking for, right? That level of whether it be automation or overall business improvement. And so focusing on that quality and value, right? And then at the same time, I call it subtly, but pushing on the de-emphasis on the absoluteness of failure.
Tom, I'd actually like to add on to Chris's answer as well. We see organizations engaging in celebrating fail-fast strategies. So one organization that I spoke with last week, the executive who's in charge of that entire business unit has weekly meetings where he holds up a fail-fast example and praises the individual, and they even have monetary awards. But it's not really the money that they put into it. It's that recognition of an individual who has failed, learned something from it, and quickly moved on to improve the situation, and others have learnings that they get from that approach as well. That strategy to destigmatize failure has meant in that organization that individuals are much more courageous about what they do with regards to their development work, and they don't hide failure, which is extremely costly. So there are a variety of strategies organizations can engage in to bring failure to the forefront as an opportunity for learning and an opportunity to create value and ongoing success.
Great example. Annalisa, a question for you. Is your product truly no code?
That's a great question. 100% no code. And what that means is you can easily either build a test case or use a pre-built test case without having to write a single line of code. And so just about everything that you're going to do within Avo Assure is already ready for someone to use very easily. No script necessary, because it is 100% code-free.
Great. We have time for a final question for you, Annalisa. How much faster can you automate with this product versus other tools on the market?
Great question. So from the customers that we've worked with, this is all just, proof in the speeds that they've achieved is 5x. It's upward of 5x, so 5 times faster than other platforms on the market today.
Well, thank you. Well, that's about all the time we have for today's webcast. I want to give a big thanks to our speakers, Melinda Ballou of IDC, Annalisa Camarillo, and Chris Horn of Avo Automation, John A. Reben of CNA Financial, for sharing their expertise and insights with us. And thanks especially to you, our viewers, for tuning in. Please be sure to check out the resources section on your console for links to some valuable Avo resources and to a special Avo survey. For Avo, IDC, and IDG, I'm Tom Schmidt.